mind, body, and spirit. This podcast is dedicated to individuals who are on a quest to uncovering their truth, understanding their genetic and spiritual DNA, and learning how to harness this knowledge to achieve optimal health. But this isn't just another health podcast. Natural Podcast is here to ignite a spark of hope within you, reminding you of your innate potential for greatness, your pure love, capable of living life to its fullest potential. Are you ready to embark on a transformational journey to achieve optimal health? In today's episode, we have Miriam. Miriam is a triple board certified functional medicine dietitian with 15 years of experience in helping people improve their physical and mental well-being through food, mindset, lifestyle, breathwork, and somatic treatment so they can feel more alive in their bodies. Miriam's healing practice is greatly influenced by her personal journey of losing her father to 9/11 when she was 13, being poisoned by pollutants from the Twin Towers, falling and surviving breast cancer. She's writing a personal memoir of healing through trauma. She's the founder of Everybody Bliss. Miriam's holistic healing approach challenges current medical narratives by examining psychological, biochemical, social, and emotional factors to resolve the underlying mystery symptoms of poor digestion, fatigue, and mood imbalances. Miriam is a renowned speaker on transforming grief into health and has been featured in HuffPost, New York Magazine, BuzzFeed, Mind Body Green, Hum Nutrition, and Voyage LA. Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast, Miriam. I'm so excited to have you on today with your knowledge and experience. I can't wait for this podcast.
And thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited for our call today.
Yeah. Look, finding out a little bit about you, I've noticed that you absolutely love staying home and doing all those mundane things like, knitting, cooking, but then also I've heard that you love traveling.
Yes. Yeah. I have been traveling since I was a teenager, and it's a passion of mine that just hasn't quite quit me. The more I travel, the more curious I become and the more places I want to go.
Yeah. And you took some time off in 2022, right? And just decided to travel.
Yeah, so I was actually sick from 2019 to 2021-ish. I was diagnosed with cancer, and after the pandemic and everything was locked down, I was like, I need to go. Like, my body and my heart were aching for freedom. So it took a long time to get over some of like the beliefs around going and work with some of the like financial logistics. But I shut my business down and I just traveled. And so that year I went to 13 different countries, and it was the best year of my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
13.
Yeah. Yeah. And just one year, some I spent like a month in, some I spent a few days in. And so I kind of just allowed myself to really hop around and explore.
Yeah. And which one did you feel was that you felt most connected to?
I would say, oh my gosh, there were so many. It's so hard to choose, but I think food-wise and culture-wise, I loved Greece so much. I could eat Greek food every day for the rest of my life and just be such a happy girl. Plus the Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea, it's just so gorgeous. And I think nature-wise, New Zealand was just such a mind-blowing experience for me. So I think those are definitely my top two.
Yeah, beautiful. I've been blessed enough to go to both of them. I can definitely relate. The food in Greece, it's just magnificent. The culture, the air, the sun, oh my gosh. And then New Zealand, wow. It's like everywhere you go, it's a postcard, right?
Yes. Yeah, I rented a van and I traveled around the South Island for a whole month. And yeah, every day I looked out of my van and I was like, wow, this is a postcard. It's really...
van in South Island. I absolutely loved it because, like you said, you're able to wake up, you can park at these random places, and they're so good with tourists. Like, they're absolutely amazing with the parks, and you just like wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, is this reality?
I know. The best part was just honestly making breakfast in the back of my van and hitting the road and just having zero plan except like where I knew I was going to try to end up at that night, and just hiking and like pulling off on the side of the road, having lunch. Like, it was just so idyllic without really needing to plan a whole lot. And Kiwis are like the nicest human beings on the planet.
They are. Did you go up to the glacier?
I did, yeah. So I got to fly in through a glacier, and then I did like a hike around it, which was kind of just like a walk, and they encouraged you to like do a cold plunge in the glacier, which I was the only one who did it.
Oh my gosh, good on you. Go you.
Let
That
me
is
just
amazing.
stick my head in the air. When am I going to ever be able to like do that again in the glacier? So
I love that. What an
yeah.
experience. Did you make your way to Australia by any chance?
I did not. No, I ended up just spending the full month in New Zealand, and Australia is still on my list. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely time to get on your list. Look, I want to know a little bit about you and your turning
Mm-hmm.
points in your life. And I mean, I think you mentioned a key thing just
Mm-hmm.
before. The reason
Mm-hmm.
why you went traveling is because you were actually diagnosed with cancer. Were
Yeah.
we able to discuss that a little bit more? Is that all right, Miriam?
Yeah, absolutely. I am an open book when it comes to
Amazing.
my story and my cancer and all of my healing processes.
Yeah, so what was going through your life in that moment and what happened and how did you, because you're still here, you're alive, which is
Yes.
amazing. So enlighten us, what's happened? What happened?
Yeah, so when I was 31 years old, I'm 36 right now. When I was 31 years old, I found a lump in my breast, and I know my body really well. I've never had any like cysts or fibroids, and so I knew it was out of place. And I ended up going to the doctor, and my doctor wasn't available. So I saw the covering doctor just because I wanted to get in as soon as possible. And they told me that it didn't feel like cancer, that I was too young, and that I didn't have cancer just based on palpating it and feeling it.
Wow.
And the reason I'm sharing this part of my story is because of the importance of self-advocacy and knowing that we know our bodies best. And if you feel like something's wrong in your body, it's so important to advocate, ask questions, and push and know your patient rights. And so
So
I pushed for a
important. So
mammogram.
important.
So important.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that because there's so many individuals that go to the doctors and they're like, I know that this is not the norm. I know that there's something there. So it's so important that you spoke about self-advocacy and knowing your body and standing up for your body and your rights.
Yeah, and just because something's common, like digestive issues or fatigue or pain is common, it doesn't make it normal. And so it is important to like ask your questions. And if you don't like what a doctor says, you can always get a second opinion or a third opinion. And so after that, I got a series of imaging. I was diagnosed with cancer, and I ended up getting a double mastectomy. And that surgery, which is complete removal of your breast tissue, was also diagnostic for me. And so they were trying to figure out what stage the cancer was, if I needed chemo, if I needed radiation. It turned out that they found it early enough that I didn't need any of the above, which is wonderful, because I don't think anyone really wants to go through chemo or radiation. Um, and and so really advocating for myself saved my life. And later on, it came out that the cancer was actually environmentally related. And so I grew up, another part of my story is I grew up in New York. And after the Twin Towers fell, it released 10,000 tons of asbestos and toxins into the air.
And that's not spoken about.
It's not spoken about, but it's very well known. Like it's very well researched and well studied. Like they have studies that are going on for decades now about it. And so through a lot of research, I was able to understand this link. And take the steps to further protect myself environmentally. Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. So at the time you lived in New York, and the Twin Towers fell, and the asbestos caused, in a way, the cancer that you were dealing with.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
and it just shows how environmental toxins impact us in a negative manner.
yeah, I think that's a lot of what we're seeing right now, especially with the rise in young people having cancer. And we don't talk about how pollutions and even like our skincare products and what we're putting in and on our bodies really do impact us, how our food industry has changed. And I know it's a little bit different in Australia than it is in the US right now, but there really is a strong impact on how environmental chemicals impact our metabolic health. And so it is important to think about what we're exposing ourselves to.
Yeah, 100%. Leave that point because we're going to go back to it. But I wanted to go back a little bit about the cancer. How did it feel to be told? Because at the time, were you in the health field?
Yeah, so I actually have been a dietitian for over 12 years. I've been in the health and wellness industry for 15 years now. And so I know health, I know my body. I've been in both the holistic space and in the hospital space. And so I do know my rights as a patient, which came in
Yeah. So
handy.
how did that
Yeah.
feel to be diagnosed with cancer as someone who's actually in the health field?
Oh, I felt like a failure. I was so embarrassed that I was diagnosed with cancer, and I blamed myself. I was like, oh, like maybe it was like the sugar that you like to eat, or, like when I was in my early
Yeah.
20s, I'd have like a drunk cigarette or two. I blamed that. And a lot of that journey and that process was reminding myself that like I didn't do anything to bring this upon myself. And I think a lot of cancer patients or cancer survivors feel like they did something wrong to cause this. And so sometimes there's not rhyme or reason to it. In my case, there was, but oftentimes there's not. And it's not a reflection like of a moral failure um, that
Yeah.
we often feel, especially someone in the health world. So yeah, a lot of my healing journey was owning that this happened to me and forgiving myself and being able to move through it.
Yeah, I think that's huge because someone in the health field to then be told that, you have cancer and you're like, well, I'm kind of, from what I understand, I'm kind of doing all the right things to be so-called healthy, eating the right
Mm-hmm.
food, exercising and so forth. And it's interesting that you mentioned you had to forgive yourself through that journey and you had to give yourself for, what you've said to yourself and I guess blamed and the process that you went through.
Yeah, because we're all just human beings and we're all in our own industries trying to figure out something about our bodies and our health. And I know that's initially what brought me into the nutrition world was wanting to learn more about my own physical and emotional relationship with food. Um, but it doesn't mean that we're gods. Like we don't know everything, and I think the permission to be human was a really important lesson that I took from that time.
Yeah, the permission to be human. I love that. That is so insightful. And I mean the whole journey of having cancer and then going through the surgery that you went through, and now you are here and then traveling, which is amazing, and giving yourself the freedom. I feel like it's taking you on a whole journey, and I feel like Miriam prior to the cancer and Miriam now is a different Miriam that sees her patients differently, that sees her practice differently. Would I be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. My life looks totally different. My brain, my body are all completely different. And I feel the difference, but it's interesting because if anyone were to see it on paper, they'd be like, oh, you're doing the same thing. But I've transformed as a person. And of course, how does that not relate to the way that I relate with my patients and the work that I'm doing in the world? So I feel like before I got cancer, I was an anxious wreck. Like I was miserable. I went through all of my journals and all of my morning pages, and every day I'm like, why am I alive? Like, I don't want to be in this world. Like, what am I doing with my life? And I think going through that process of like my body and my world kind of crumbling apart, it helped me figure out like what pieces do I want to put back together? How do I want to really consciously rebuild this new life that's going to work for me a lot better than how I was approaching it before. And it really was a few mental adjustments.
Yeah, consciously rebuild. I love that. It's like I'm not just letting life happen to me. I'm taking the life and I'm consciously reliving it. So, how would you say your practice has changed? Would you just start focusing on certain things a little bit more or less on certain things?
Yeah, so I think from like a bird's eye view, I think that I'm owning my voice and I'm owning my story in a much bigger way than I was able to before. And so with that comes differences in the work that I'm doing. I've always helped people with digestive health, but I'm talking a lot more about trauma and how emotions impact our gut, which I've always known this connection, right? But to embody and own that story is really different. I also won't take on weight loss patients anymore when it's just for weight loss. I realized
Wow.
like I still will help people, right? But if they're coming to me and their only goals are aesthetic, like I can't help you because that kind of mindset is actually really detrimental to our health, right? When we're hyper focused on just body weight. If someone comes to me and they're like, I really want to feel good, I want to feel more confident, and I want to lose weight, I'm like, okay, like the weight stuff tends to come, but I won't see primarily weight loss patients anymore just because it made me miserable and it actually wasn't serving them. And I started to really see that. And so
That
whether
is
that was like the amount of time that I spent in the field or because of my shifting priorities, I'm not sure exactly which one, but the time
yeah.
aligned in that way.
I love that. Absolutely love that you mentioned that. It's kind of like knowing your ideal patients and kind of
Mm-hmm.
like what you want and what you don't want. And, the weight loss is just, for some individuals, just a physical appearance, which is so interesting that you're like, no, there's so much deeper stuff than that. If the confidence comes out of it, if a quality of life comes with it, 100% will help you lose weight. But if it's just a physical appearance, though, that's kind of like, no, I can spend that energy on other individuals who are here to thrive in a holistic manner.
Yeah, exactly. Because weight doesn't equate health. And when someone's so hyperfixated on the numbers, I'm more interested in like approaching their mindset and what are the stories they're telling themselves? What's their own history around food? What did their mother teach them, whether like consciously or subconsciously, around their bodies, right? So I'm more interested in getting in deep with people like that, and who are open and willing to go to those places versus people who want like a very prescriptive measured out meal plan, because I know it works. And eating on a very strict meal plan leads to yo-yo dieting and weight gain, weight loss, and weight gain. And so it's actually really not helping anyone to approach our bodies and health that way.
100%. And I don't know about you, but would you say that, most individuals who do come for weight loss, actually underneath it, there is all this trauma that's holding on to that weight? Would you say that?
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
learned, I forget where I learned this at one of my first jobs, and I don't know how much research is really involved with this, but my old boss would tell me how emotions, like we store emotions in our fat cells, which find really fascinating because we store toxins in our fat cells. We store hormones in our fat cells, but the idea of storing emotions in our fat cells, I think, is just a really interesting concept. Because I do find that when people do lose weight, especially big amounts of weight, there's always stories and relationships to evaluate, like relationships to themselves, relationships to the world, societal expectations, the patriarchy, right? Their mothers, their grandmothers, whatever that is. We all have a story, especially as women living in this world.
Yeah, I think I read a study a while ago, and it was talking about women who have been sexually abused,
Mm.
and they actually are more likely to be more obese than individuals who weren't. And it was had to do with, like, I'm going to, not intentionally, this happens, and it's like I'm going to make my body as not attractive to other individuals, so therefore I feel safe, and therefore that won't occur again to an extent. It was really, really interesting. I was like mind blown. I was like, okay, that's interesting. So it talks about the same thing that you're talking about, holding the emotions in our fat cells.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And then there's also the other end of it, right? Which is how food impacts our mental health and our brain health, right? And food is a really potent modulator of our mood. And when we eat foods that are high in sugar, salt, fat, gluten, dairy, it actually stimulates like feel good chemicals, right? Some foods bind to opioid receptors and have that morphine like effect on our brain. Other foods, like sugar driven foods, are going to drive a dopamine response, which is our pleasure neurotransmitter. It helps our bodies feel good. And so when we've gone through something really traumatic and really emotionally jarring, people tend to go to food to numb, right? Because it makes our bodies feel good. But the problem is that that feel good effect only lasts as good as the cookie does or as good as the piece of chocolate does. So we tend to eat and eat and eat to get that numbing effect, to get that feel good effect. And over time, we need more and more and more to overcome that response. And so I think it's a really interesting conversation because it's what is like the physiological impact of the trauma, and then what is the impact of the trauma that's then driving our choices.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about trauma gut axis. Because
Yes.
that's your thing, and you love it, and you touched upon it just a little bit now.
Hmm.
But maybe it's the first time that people have even heard. People have heard the brain gut axis number of times, but this trauma gut axis, what is this? And yeah, tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so our like you mentioned, our brains and our guts are directly connected. We have a whole nervous system in our gut. The enteric nervous system. It's over 500 million neurons that innervate our gut, which is actually more neurons in our gut than is in our spine. And when our nervous system is dysregulated, it's going to have a direct impact on our digestive health. So when we go through when we're under chronic stress, or we're living through or have gone through a traumatic event and have some people have developed PTSD after that, it's the way that it's held in our nervous system, right? And so you may notice you have a specific reaction towards a stimuli that you didn't even know that you had. You know, you like walk into a crowded room and then all of a sudden you have a panic attack, for example, right? That is a response that lives in your body, and that's going to have a direct impact on your gut because of the way our nervous system innervates our gut. And so trauma is going to reduce digestion. It's going to negatively impact all of our digestive enzymes and our stomach acid that are required for breaking down our food. And it's also going to have negative impacts on the microbiome. And our microbiome are the trillions of bacteria that live in our gut that produce neurotransmitters that regulate our mood, right? Our microbiome produces serotonin, which is our happy neurotransmitter. That's often low in people that suffer from depression, right? And also GABA is produced in our gut, is another major neurotransmitter that is really calming. It's an anti-anxiety. It helps us sleep at night. And so if you are having chronic stress or unresolved trauma, that's going to impact our gut. And then vice versa, gut imbalances are also going to impact our mental health, because that direction goes both ways.
Yeah, wow, you just kind of like gave so much information. So if we just pull it out, it's like, I love this. I love this. It's like a traumatic event occurs, and as this traumatic event occurs, it impacts our gut microbiome, it impacts our digestion, it reduces the stomach acid production, and so therefore we're unable to take nutrients from the food that we eat. I guess we could be eating as healthy as possible, but we're not getting those nutrients in there. And this is why some people are like, well, I'm eating really healthy, but it's not getting digested,
Mm-hmm.
and the nutrients aren't getting absorbed. And then you've also mentioned that, in our gut, neurotransmitters are made, such as serotonin, GABA. Serotonin makes us happy, GABA calms us. And it's like, okay, so this traumatic event impacted my gut, our gut, and therefore it's impacting my brain. Like, that's just mind blowing.
Yeah, and it not only impacts your brain, it impacts your joint health, total body inflammation, like it can predispose you to autoimmune conditions. And so there's a lot of connection that happens through our gut. And I think really the gut is the portal for our entire body's health. And so it can make us really sick, or it can really be the key to our healing.
Yeah. Do you know, after a traumatic experience, do you know how long it takes for it to impact our gut? Does it happen like traumatic experience occurs and therefore it impacts our digestion and our gut microbes straight away? Does it take a few weeks, a few months? How long is the impact? Like, how does that occur?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I would say it's really different for every single person, right? Because if someone has a stressful event or a traumatic event and then is able to come back to a sense of safety in their bodies, right? It's all about being able to come back to a sense of safety and resolve that. Then it's going to have much less of an effect on the gut than if a traumatic event is unresolved, if you're unsafe and you continue to have your nervous system dysregulated. That's going to have a much larger impact on the gut. But I'm sure a lot of people can even know that connection of like, oh, you had a really stressful meeting and you find yourself running to the bathroom, right? That's a stress gut reaction right there, on a smaller level than what may happen with bigger events.
And you're so right. That's what happens. Like individuals might have an interview or they have a meeting they're stressed about and they're in the toilet. Even after
Hmm.
a game, if people play any sports, like they're in the toilets. Like it's thinking about it, you're just like, oh my gosh, yeah, that does happen. Is
Hmm.
that what the, trauma gut axis is?
Well, if you think about it too, I mean, like when your nervous system is activated and when we're really stressed out, blood is going to flow to our muscles. And from an evolutionary perspective, it like gets us mobilizing. It gets us like running away from the bear. It helps us survive, right?
Yeah.
But it also compromises digestive function because blood is flowing away from your gut. And so, what's the result of that? Oftentimes, it can be diarrhea, or it can be constipation.
Yeah, yeah. So do you see a lot of individuals, because you deal with a lot of gut
Hmm.
issues and gut
Hmm.
health, do you
Hmm.
see like all of the issue, most people have trauma and that's when they get the gut, or is it like 90%, 80%? What do you see in your practice?
Yeah, I'd say sometimes people have traumatic, issues that are, especially like adverse childhood events.
Mm,
Real like early childhood events are really linked to digestive issues and digestive health, and so that's a really major connection. And so I think it's really, like I said, it's really different for every single person. So some people, their digestive issues have started because of those traumatic events. And some people have digestive issues that have gotten worse through chronic stress and through traumatic issues. And so either way, we do need to approach the gut at the gut level and the nervous system at the nervous system level. It still takes a multi-prong approach. So I often don't find myself like harping on like we always look for why. We're always looking for why, but I try not to get people in that like victimized mindset, if that makes sense, of like weeding through too much of the why, because sometimes we just need to figure out ways to move forward. And like,
yeah.
what is that path forward? Sometimes it's reflecting, and we absolutely need to understand what is contributing to those imbalances. Um, but it's a fine line.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. You did mention, when trauma occurs, it impacts our gut, our
Mm-hmm.
neurotransmitters. You even mentioned joint health. Is there any other biochemical changes that occur in the body?
With imbalanced digestion, or
With trauma response?
yeah, so our entire bodies are impacted, from our
Mm,
brain health to our hormones to our cycles. If we go through, as women, our menstrual cycles, if we go through a traumatic event, our brain function is going to be altered, which is going to alter the impact on our uterus and our ovaries. Our entire endocrine function is impacted. Um, I think digestion, joint autoimmune conditions, there's so much that can be impacted by stress and by trauma, which I think is cancer. Like we're seeing all of these issues on the rise in our modern society, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because the audience listening might be like, wow, I never thought, me being stressed or having a traumatic event, especially like you mentioned in your childhood, would have such a huge impact. Even autoimmune diseases, bone health, joint health, neurotransmitters. And it's like, I guess if it impacts our gut, it impacts so many other things because that's where we absorb our nutrients, our minerals, our vitamins.
Well, and it's our body's main like bodyguard. It's what keeps pathogens out, it's what keeps toxins out. We're constantly consuming things that are not good for us throughout the day, but our bodies are so good at protecting and healing us.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. So,
Yeah.
you're known for transforming grief
Hmm.
into health, and I love
Hmm.
that. How do you use that? What does it look like in your practice when patients come and see you, looking at their gut health, their overall well-being? Because I know that you work in a holistic manner. What does that look
Hmm.
like?
Yeah, so I really meet people where they're at. So sometimes we start with the stories, right? They're telling themselves stories and they're getting caught in their like mental loops and they're trying to make sense of things. And so we start there, right? Or we notice there's like maybe some self-sabotaging beliefs and behaviors. And we start with like the mental health component of it. Always nutrition is always the foundation for all the work that I'm doing. And so everything that I'm describing mental health wise and nervous system wise is kind of the cherry on top. Um, and then sometimes people need to work the stress through their bodies. And so that's when I bring somatic practicing online and realize really connecting with where are they holding the stress physically in their bodies and really working with that. And sometimes we utilize breath work. Sometimes breath work can be really activating in terms of activating stress cycles, but helping us complete them in a way that's really safe for our bodies and releasing emotions and releasing a lot of stuck energy in our nervous system. And then sometimes people need more grounding practices and more grounding support. And so it's really, and I'm just going to say like when someone walks in my door, but when someone walks into like my virtual office, it's really what are they coming in with and what is going to be the most supportive thing for them at that moment in time.
Yeah, I love that because usually individuals, when they go, oh, I'm seeing a dietitian, they wouldn't even think a dietitian would guide them through breath work or any type of somatic therapy or anything like that. So how amazing is it that you're combining it all together?
Well, it's because I figured out what works for me, right? And I'm like, okay, these are really powerful tools that have worked for me, which is why I'm like, oh, I really want to study them and help other people through this way. Because healing, nutrition's one layer of healing. Our bodies, we're so multidimensional and our bodies are so complex and our lives are so complex. And so we sometimes need different tools. Like you wouldn't use like a hammer if you need a screwdriver, and sometimes we just need different tools for healing.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So, when we're talking about gut health, is there any type of certain macros or minerals or vitamins that really you have seen a huge impact on gut health that has supported either the tight junctions, or the mucus layer or anything along those lines? Is there anything that you've seen damaged more and therefore certain minerals or vitamins or macronutrients are able to assist it?
Yes. So when it comes to someone like with, presenting with like a healthy gut, because everyone is different, like I was saying. So if you're having like gut imbalances, we really need to figure out what are the imbalances? Is it digestion? Is there imbalances in the gut microbiome? And so that's where it really becomes individualized. But for every single person, we need to be eating more plants. So a really fun challenge that I like to give people is trying to get 40 different plants in.
You say 40?
40. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. But bear with me.
What does that look like? Tell us, Miriam.
Okay. So,
are you saying we should go vegan?
No. I was a vegetarian for 14 years, and I was actually really sick as a vegetarian. And
wow.
I don't think
we can go into that. You can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, I will. But let me finish my 40 thought before I go on a tangent, because it's very tangential. And so 40 plants a week can be anything from like a red apple and a green apple can be considered different plants because the different colors have different phytonutrients that feed the different bacteria in your gut. And so it's actually a lot easier to get it in than you would think. So for example, for breakfast, let's say you're having some yogurt for breakfast, right? You can actually add in some chia seeds, some ground flax seeds, some hemp seeds, and some blueberries, right? And that's 4 different plants just with one meal. So there are different ways that you can sneak it in. And then like maybe for lunch, you have greens, right? That's one. You have like arugula, let's say. Then you add some tomatoes, some cucumbers. I'm just counting on my fingers. And then you have pumpkin seeds, maybe some avocado, right? And so you have 5 plants right there. So all of a sudden before 2 p.m., you've gotten in 9 different plants.
Yeah,
so
wow.
It's actually really possible when you start paying attention to it. And the reason I try to challenge people to do that is to get a lot of variety in their diet. And just because I'm emphasizing plants like we were talking about doesn't mean that you need to eliminate meat or fish or eggs, but just really emphasizing that every single person really needs to emphasize more vegetables and more plants in their diet.
Yeah, I love that explanation of just, having those seeds and the chia seeds, the flax seeds, the blueberries, and then like rocket, tomato, cucumber, and things like that, and combining it together. It's like, wow, like just by doing that, by lunchtime you've hit about 10 plants, and it's like, okay, dinner time comes, hit another 10, that's 15, and you just swap it around tomorrow, you've got 30, and it's like, wow, actually thinking about it, it's quite doable, because when you said 40, I was like, oh my gosh, wow, that's just overwhelming for some individuals. But you're able to do it quite easily. And I think it's also the variety of the polyphenols, the flavonoids that you're getting, which have been linked to gut health, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, different polyphenols will feed different bacterial species in your gut. And so that's where variety really comes in. As key. And then fiber just in general is a prebiotic. It helps feed those really good bacteria that we want to grow and that we want to repopulate our gut with.
It seems so simple. So simple.
And it's also fun because most people, when they're think about like going on a diet, they think about restricting themselves versus what if we can really invite in abundance, and what if we can really look for like all the really exciting amazing foods that we want to be gravitating towards rather than what we want to be moving away from.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you're not restricting individuals. You're actually saying, hey, here's a challenge to add amazing things in that is actually going to be beneficial. And by doing that, you're probably excluding the things that I would have wanted you to exclude anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It kind of, it pushes less ideal foods off of the plate.
Yeah. Do you do any microbiome testing for individuals?
I do, yeah. So that is a really helpful tool to use because when we're working with the microbiome, I want to be really careful always. I'm very cautious about putting people on antimicrobial protocols, even if they're herbal antimicrobial protocols, because our gut is really delicate. And so I'll run SIBO testing for people, which is breath testing. For those people who don't know about that, you basically consume a solution, and if you have bacterial overgrowth in your small intestine, certain gases will be produced and show up on that test. And so that's a really helpful one. And then I also run stool microbiome tests, which is like more of a traditional microbiome test. And it can really, using like DNA, we can really see what bacteria are prevalent in the gut, if there's any pathogens overgrowing, if there's any parasites, and what the balance of the good bacteria are and the less good bacteria are, so that we can really target them with different fibers.
Yeah. And have you seen a trend in regards to microbiome testing, as in like most of your patients have this or they don't have that? Has there been any type of trend that you've noticed after doing so many microbiome testing stools?
It's just people are really low in beneficial bacteria, like really low in beneficial bacteria. And so I have almost everyone on prebiotic fiber as they can tolerate it.
Do you use PHGG or?
Yeah. So I use that, but that's actually more, it's the Sunfiber PHGG that is really good for creating like an acidic environment in the gut and creating short chain fats that nourish the gut lining. But when it comes to being a prebiotic, it's not as good of a prebiotic.
Okay.
Like the prebiotics that are going to be really beneficial are going to be like lactulose, which can be reactive for some people, and it's not found over the counter in the States, but your people in Australia will be able to find it, which is why I mentioned it. And then I also use GOS powder, which is my main one that I'll use here. And galacto-oligosaccharides, it's really good for feeding different bacteria. And the reason I use prebiotic fibers versus the probiotics, and I'll use probiotics sometimes, but when we supplement with probiotics, it's not the actual bacteria that are indigenous for our gut.
Yeah, I love that you explained why you use prebiotics compared to probiotics, because most people think, I've got gut issues, I've got IBS, I've got bloating, and the first thing they do is they go to the chemist and get themselves some probiotics. And essentially that can actually do a little bit of harm for some individuals.
Yeah, it's really, and it also might just be a waste of money for a lot of people, right? Because probiotics usually aren't like the biggest cause of IBS. Like I'll often look to other factors first. But yeah, it can be really frustrating for people who want to get better and they're looking for the probiotics, but the ones that are in the capsules that are in the bottles aren't the actual probiotics that live in our gut. And so people think that they're replacing them, but they're actually not, which is why, again, prebiotics are really helpful.
Yeah, let's feed the ones that we have. It's interesting that, in running so many microbiome tests that you're really noticing, okay, it's not that individuals have these parasites or gut bacteria or viruses or whatever in their gut. It's like they actually don't have enough beneficial bacteria. And I guess the damage of that is that potentially if you don't have enough of the good ones, the bad ones can overgrow, and that's where the issues arise.
Yeah, the bad ones overgrow. It's like an empty parking lot. If like good cars aren't parked there, it's like a bunch of bad cars are going to park, right? And create problems.
Yeah,
um, and and so yeah, there it gives the opportunity for yeasts and fungus to overgrow as well. And so making sure that you only go on antibiotics like when you absolutely have to is a really important thing for people to understand. And I think it happens, maybe, I don't know if it's happening in Australia as much as it's happening in the US, but antibiotics are overprescribed for everything, like sometimes even dental cleanings.
yeah, wow.
So
It definitely have been overprescribed here in Australia. There's research that's come out that, yeah, they're definitely overprescribed. And I feel like some of the general practitioners here are pulling back a little bit because of this, and they're noticing it. But I think we have created a culture where we go there and we actually ask for them because that's what we know. It's a safety thing because of fear that comes out, and we're so scared of infections, and we're so scared of these bacteria or viruses. So individuals are like, "Yep, give me those antibiotics."
well, and it becomes ironic, right, over time because we want a pill to, because we're afraid of the bacteria and we're afraid of, afraid of all these things. But really, over time, what we're doing is we're making ourselves even more susceptible to them.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you think are the top things that actually make us have less um, good bacteria that you said are found in the stool test that you have? What do you think it's impacting that mainly?
Stress. I think
Yeah,
stress is impacting us in a really, really massive way. Um, and I also think this like war on our food system, the quality of food, the soil that our food is grown in, like processed foods is also wreaking havoc on our systems. But I think stress is one, like we see the food pieces of it, and I think everyone's aware of the food pieces of it, but people don't really understand the impact that stress has like on our bodies. Especially like, again, it comes back to gut issues. It wears on those tight junctions that you were mentioned earlier, and it makes us susceptible to dysbiosis and other diseases.
yeah, it's so interesting. And yeah, stress absolutely impacts our gut. Would you say there's any so let's say an individual goes through a traumatic event or a stressful
Mm-hmm.
experience in their life, right? Is there anything that they can do in, I guess, the acute way after they've experienced this stress to help their gut? I guess some people be like, do I take some probiotics straight away after I've experienced some stressful event?
Mm.
Do I drink more water? Do I take some glutamine? Like, what do I do after I've experienced stress to assist my gut health?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I I may, consider like digestive enzymes, like you had mentioned. I would probably try to like eat a little bit more simply, things that our bodies don't have to work as hard to digest. Like soups are a great one, like soups and purees, rice, and just like simple proteins are always a good bet. But I think it also is really important to say, like, we need to find ways for your body to come back to safety. And one of the fastest things that you can do when you have experienced something traumatic is establishing connection with people that you feel safe around. And that's one of the best ways to regulate your nervous system, is give a hug to a trusted friend or partner. Spend some time with someone who can like make you laugh, right? Or if you're not connected with someone like physically in the same space, like call someone up for support. Um, get yourself to laugh at a funny movie, hum, sing. All of those are going to be really grounding for your nervous system.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of like we were just talking about gut health, and you're telling me to hum and you're telling me to hug someone. It's crazy how
Yes.
that is actually going to help you create more hydrochloric acid, so you're able to digest more food. It's mind blowing, isn't it?
Well, our entire bodies are connected, you know. It's like we don't, our gut don't, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, you know. Our hearts and our hormones, none of that exists in a vacuum. Our bodies are so intricately connected, and of course, it's going to be impacted by our experience in the world.
Yeah, it's like, next time a stressful event occurs, like rub your ears a little bit, do some breathing exercises, connect that vagus nerve, like you said, with the
Mm-hmm.
humming. And therefore, you'll be able to help your gut heal. So, therefore, you're able to digest the food. But I do like that you mentioned also pureeing food and that's potentially digestive enzymes. I think that's so important because sometimes we freak out and we go, oh, what do we do? What do we do? And it's like, usually when you're stressed out, you don't eat healthy. You're not going to go, I'm going to have a broccoli soup. Like that's one of the last things people probably think about. But you're right. It's going to help your gut health.
Yeah, think about like, oh, I had a really stressful day. I want to get Chinese food or a pizza, you
Yeah.
know, but like if we can begin to reprogram that and say like, actually like some chicken soup is going to be so ultra nourishing for my body right now.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, 100% bone broth. If you can handle it, absolutely amazing
Hmm.
for your gut health. I want to go back to you being vegetarian. Can we go
Hmm.
back to
Oh yeah, please.
that?
Let's.
Tell me about that. What happened there?
Well, I decided to be a vegetarian when I was 9 years old, and I had a very
Wow.
sweet mother who said, okay.
9 years old.
um,
That's very you've chosen that and you were determined. Like did you see
oh,
like what happened? Like did you see some animals and you fell in love with them? Was there a sheep called Lucy that you loved or what was it?
I wish it was that cute of a story. I know. I went to a summer camp growing up, and the meat was really gross, and
Yeah.
so my mom signed me up for a vegetarian food plan, and I came back vegetarian. So that's my story. My very non like moral story related to being vegetarian, but I stuck with it for a really long time. Um, and when I was in my 20s, I was really sick, and I was that was a combination of like my own trauma, but also the way that I was eating. And I think we can like put labels on any diet, right? And we could be like, oh, like eating vegetarian and vegan so good, and eating meat is bad, but it's like, how are you doing it? Like, I want to know exactly what's on your food plate and the foods that you're deciding to put into your body, because that determines the health of them more than any label, whether it's like keto or Mediterranean diet or, like I want to know, I'm more interested in what you're actually eating. And so for me at the time, I was eating pasta and grilled cheese sandwiches.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't eating well. I wasn't treating my body well. My mindset was still like a mess. I still had PTSD from childhood, and um, once I began shifting my diet, that's when my symptoms began to shift
Yeah, wow.
in a
It's good.
really big
So,
way.
do you think being vegan or vegetarian impacts our gut health in a so-called negative manner or can cause more damage than good?
I think it can when people aren't eating enough protein, for example. But I often wonder about vegans and vegetarians because I work with vegans who'll come to me and they're really, really imbalanced.
Mm,
And I wonder, sometimes like, are you just not getting enough nutrients from the food that you're eating? Or did you choose to be vegan because you're actually not feeling good? And that's what I get really curious about because people often will choose veganism because meat's making them sick. And what people don't realize is meat requires stomach acid to
lots of it.
digest. Yeah. And sometimes people who are insufficient stomach acid will feel really bad when they eat meat. And it's not necessarily the meat the problem, it's the stomach acids that's the problem. And so taking that functional medicine perspective and really trying to resolve what the cause is to help people then tolerate the foods that they do want to be having. And so that's a major curiosity for me. Like, is it the chicken or is it the egg?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because it's so true. When I talk to people, I'm like, why did you, stop eating meat? And they're like, it just felt heavy in the stomach and it just didn't feel right. And I'm like, when the white felt heavy, were you stressed out eating it? Did you eat it really fast? Did you create enough digestive enzymes? Is there enough hydrochloric acid in there? What's the quality of the meat, right? There's so many factors you can take into consideration. What was your thoughts about this food? Because most people are like, I actually don't like eating meat, and then they eat it and it's like, well, that has a huge impact. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've done studies on how like our thoughts and our emotions impact like water molecules. So like our energy really does have an impact on the food that we eat. And, I think what you're saying about our mindset, like if we eat in this like really negative, like space where we're like hating the foods that we're eating and we're hating our bodies when we're doing it, that's going to translate energetically to our food.
Yeah. So what kind of practices can individuals put into place to ensure, I guess, that they're able to digest their food and I guess their gut health is on point? Is there any practices that you recommend put into place?
I think the best thing that someone can do without needing to buy anything or invest in anything is literally sit down, put their food on a plate, and take 20 minutes at least to eat a meal. And doing that and challenging yourself to do that will require you to chew your food really thoroughly, which is what a lot of people miss. You're not like eating a sandwich over the kitchen sink. You're chewing your food properly. And then you're also doing that. You're slowing down enough to get your nervous system in a place where blood can flow to your gut and actually work to digest the food that you're eating.
Yeah.
So without
20
needing
minutes.
to buy anything,
Wow.
20 minutes.
Yeah, a lot of people who are like, wow, I've got so many more things to do because they're in the office, they're smashing out work, especially at lunchtime. It's like, wow, my lunch break is, let's say, half an hour. It's like, wow, 20 minutes, the whole lunchtime I'm just going to be eating. I'm just going to be chewing. I'm like going to be like a cow.
Try it. I challenge people to try it and like let me know what they think, because it really can make a huge impact to slow down and eat. And also, like you're talking about the mindset, like signaling to yourself that you're worthy of rest, that you're worthy of a break. You're not a machine. You're a human being.
Yeah,
like you deserve
wow.
to nourish yourself properly, and you're deserving of that care.
Yeah, you deserve that because then you'll be able to take the minerals and vitamins from it and then essentially, make
Mm-hmm.
those neurotransmitters and be happier, be a better person and so forth. Um, so that's kind of like the techniques that we can do. So taking about 20 minutes, chewing our food slowly. Is there any supplements that you think are game changers in regards to gut health that you've seen?
Yeah, so I think what you said before, PHEG, which is partially hydrolyzed guar gum or sun fiber, I recommend that to most people. Just because it creates such a good environment in the gut, and it regulates bowel movements, whether you toggle more to like the diarrhea end, like loose stool, or constipation. So I think that's a really, really good like universal one for everyone. Other than that, I think digestive enzymes can be really supportive, especially when people are eating out or eating foods that they know are going to cause some stomach upset. I think digestive enzymes are really, really helpful to have on hand.
Yeah.
And like I could go on and on, but I'd say those are two really good ones to
I
start
love
with,
that. I
to
love
not
that. I've had
overwhelm
my daily
people.
dose of PHEG this morning.
Same here. I love
I love it.
that.
I love it. Our little gut bugs are like, wee, thank you so much.
Exactly.
I love that. And you're so right with digestive enzymes. Look, I personally don't like individuals using digestive enzymes all the time because I want them to be able to make their own. However, when you actually think about it, going to a restaurant it's actually not an ideal place to digest. It's not an ideal place to eat. Most of them are loud. There's different types of energies. You're talking, you're excited, you're kind of maybe nervous, you're stressed. Most of the time, this is just me saying, it's like, it's not an ideal place for digestion, right? So it's kind of like taking a digestive enzyme is going to assist.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's sometimes we need a little bit of support, like a little extra helping hand.
Yeah,
So I
amazing.
agree. I mean, certain people do need to take them all the time, but I agree that certain people don't,
Yeah,
or a lot of people don't.
yeah. And is there any foods that you think have been game changers? Any top foods that you think really, really assist individuals with their gut health?
I think sauerkraut is just so amazing. Like sauerkraut, kimchi, if people can get in natto even, any like fermented foods, is going to be really, really helpful for gut health.
Yeah, love the sauerkraut, traditional German food with the mashed potatoes, and then you got the sauerkraut, and then you got a piece
Yes,
of
yeah, I
meat.
honestly just like use sauerkraut again as one of my plants, there's how many plants are in there.
Yeah,
So I just add that to the top of my salads.
yeah,
And it's a
exactly.
really great one.
Yeah, and I think also the cold potato, the resistant starch in
Hmm.
cold potato is assistant. So it's kind of like back in the traditional, like there's a lot of
Hmm.
traditional meals that use cold potato salad.
Yeah, cold potatoes, and the same starch is going to be in like cold rice and cold oatmeal. So those are some other like, so even like overnight oats could be a really great breakfast
Yeah,
too, because of that resistant starch in there.
that is amazing. Yeah, and when you
Yeah.
think about it, like traditions have used these, like, cold rice, cold potatoes, sauerkrauts, like
Hmm.
kimchi, like people used to make it.
Hmm.
It's like, wow, let's bring all that back. Let's bring all those amazing foods back into our plate and use it as one of those 40, and get our gut health on point.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And like I think sprouts are also always a really great food to add in. Like microgreens and sprouts, especially like broccoli sprouts, are going to be really helpful for liver health and
Yeah,
detoxification and reducing inflammation. And so talking about, beyond the gut, just full body
yeah. Do you grow
benefits.
your own?
I've gone through cycles of growing my own and then buying them at the farmer's market and getting them from Whole Foods. And so I'm kind of
Yeah,
a little bit hectic over here, but I try when I
yeah.
can.
Yeah, but you did mention also like food where it comes from. I think that's absolutely
Mhm.
amazing too. Do you grow any of your own veggies? Do you have any or?
I do. I started a garden. So I'm born and raised in New York City. So this whole connection to nature has been new to me since moving to LA.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I started my own garden a few years ago. And so I've successfully grown some tomatoes and cucumbers and zucchinis, eggplant.
Nice.
Yeah. So have some like cute little herbs growing. And I think in terms of food sovereignty and freedom. Like I think there's so much that happens when we connect with plants from like a seed level. And then also talking about like your microbiome, getting in the dirt, putting your hands in the dirt, right? It's
Yes,
going to be
yes.
helpful for your microbiome as well. So there's so many impacts and benefits.
Yeah, I read a
Um,
study last week about touching soil and how it impacts our microbiome and how beneficial it
mhm.
is. And it's like if you've got kids, if you yourself or elderly get in the garden and don't wear like, okay, gloves, some individuals if you are using toxins, okay. But if you're using the natural stuff, there's no need to use gloves. Get in there, get it, let it go under your fingernails, like get involved.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, that's really good for your brain health, for your mental health too. It helps create serotonin in your brain. Like, there's so many benefits of just like getting in there and getting dirty.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I
yeah.
guess
And
also
then
know
there's,
where your food's coming from, yeah, right? Like you kind of want to know where your food's coming from.
knowing where your food's coming from. And also, honestly, the food that I grow in my garden is the most delicious food. Like, I don't want to buy tomatoes from the store. I only want tomatoes from my garden because I know how delicious they are. And I think it helps us connect with our food in a different way. It creates like pride. I think it also connects us with like life affirming energy and life death cycles in a different way. And so I think spiritually, it's also really a beautiful practice. And so there's so many different avenues of that are so
Yeah,
beneficial.
I could life death cycle, growing. Oh my gosh, we could just keep talking and talking and talking, but like wow, yes, the life death cycle helps your gut.
Sure, I can always make that connection.
We can make the connection to anything, right? I love it. No, I think you've been absolutely amazing, Miriam, and shared some valuable information about, trauma and grief and turning it into health and what you're able to do for your gut health. And I guess the audience understands a little bit more about now, wow, stress and trauma actually impacts my gut. And you notice it by just having a stressful meeting. You're in the toilet. And if that's what it does acutely, imagine what it can do long term. And what practices, some of the stuff that you shared today, you can put into place to ensure that your gut health is on point. I mean, of course, talk to your healthcare professional. None of this is to be taken as advice, but it's just information that's interesting to make a link and plant a seed and be like, wow, this is impacting my gut health.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I also just want to add to that and say that we're never a lost cause. I think sometimes when people are dealing with health issues that feel totally beyond their control, they feel like they've made their bed and then now they have to sleep in it, you know? And I really just want to encourage people to keep looking for answers. It's never too late to turn your health around and to start making choices that are really aligned with how you want to be feeling and living your life. And so, just like a little note to just like keep going, and that our bodies are incredibly good at healing and they want to heal. And we just need to give them good inputs.
I love that. I love that, Miriam. Before we close up, what is your natural health hack? Like, what do you do every day or once a week that really gets you to your health goals?
I think every single day I wake up and I ask my body what I need, you know, and I really try to just tune in, and regardless of what comes up, I try to not be judgmental about it. If I need to do a really hard workout because I know it's going to help energize me and make me feel good, I want to do that. But if I need to just like nap and take a rest, I really just try to lean into what my body is asking for to build trust with it long term.
Yeah, and that creates that whole thing that you're talking about, the safety.
Mm-hmm.
And being, I love that you asked the question. It's like, what does my body need? That's such a good health hack. I love it. Thank you for sharing that with us. Look, Miriam, I'm going to put in the show notes individuals how they can contact you, your webpage, and also your Instagram, so that they can follow you and you'll be able to share your amazing information about gut health. But thank you so much for joining us on Natural Podcast. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Mihaela. I really, really just enjoyed being here in our conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Natural Podcast. And remember, you're pure love, capable of living life to your fullest expression. Content and information provided here is opinion of Mihaela Raguse and is for information purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. It is not intended to provide medical advice or take the place of medical advice or any current treatment you're undertaking. Consult your own medical professionals for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast. It is advised that you consult your doctor or healthcare professional in relation to any health concerns you may be having. Mihaela Raguse does not take responsibility for any health consequences which occur from a person listening, viewing, or reading this content. And in no circumstances shall the Natural Podcast, Mihaela Raguse, any guests or contributors to the Natural Podcast, or any employees, associates, or affiliates of Mihaela Raguse be responsible for damages arising from the information provided on the Natural Podcast. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical conditions in either yourself or others. Please note, if you're taking prescription, do not stop your medication or start a new protocol, including but not limited to supplements, diet, lifestyle changes without consulting your doctor or healthcare professional. If you or any person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical advice. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have read or heard on the Natural Podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. Neither Mihaela Raguse nor the publisher of this content takes responsibility for the possible health consequences of any person or persons reading or listening or following the information in the educational content.